Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the second round of the Norway chess tournament being held here in Stavanger. Now, in round number one, I start off with a bang by winning with the black piece against Fabiano Caruana in the classical game, and now in round two, we have the famous El Clasico matchup once again between myself and, of course, the five-time world champion and current world number one player in the world, Magnus Carlsen from Norway. Now, it is a double round robin, so I am playing Magnus with both white and black, and in the second round, I start off with the white pieces. So, I play the move e4. Magnus again decides to play the move e5, knight f3, knight c6, and I play the Spanish. We get a6, bishop a4, knight f6, and now I play this move d3. Now, this is what is known as the closed Spanish. Basically, if white were to castle, you give black the option to grab the juicer on e4, and this is what would be known as the open. So when white plays d3, you're guarding this pawn on e4. It leads to a very slow game generally, but there's nothing very forcing. Now, had I castled, I do not think Magnus would have gone for the open Spanish. I think he would have probably returned to his favorite martial defense with bishop e7, b5, bishop b3, and castles. Magnus and I actually drew a very quick game, I believe in last year's edition of Norway Chess, in this exact line. But today, I decided not to go for this. I wanted to play a game. I figured, why not? I've already lost 14 great classical games to Magnus, and I've won one time in my career. So, if I lose another game or I lose another 10 games, who cares? It's not going to change a whole lot whether that number is 14 losses or it is 30 losses. So I figured, let's play chess. So I play the move d3. Magnus goes bishop c5, I castle, we get d6, I play c3, castles, knight d2, and now we get the move bishop a7. Now what's funny is that Magnus and I actually have had this exact position. We played this during one of the pandemic events from yesteryear, I believe in 2021. It's a game that I was not aware of until my second told me about it afterwards, but apparently we have played this position before. So here I play the move h3. Magnus goes knight e7, rook e1, knight g6, and now I play the move knight f1. Now this move is not precise because here black has a nice move d5, building a big black center right away. And you might be thinking on first glance, what's the big deal? You take the pawn. And after Magnus captures, you probably think, well, wait, 1, 2, attacking the pawn, 1 guarding. It's a free juicer. It, however, is not a free pawn because if I were to take the pawn, black can trade the knights, and now black has a nice sacrifice. Bishop takes f2, checking the king here. If I move the king, the game goes on with even material. There's nothing wrong with this for white. But if I were to capture the bishop, after the move queen to f6, it's uh-oh spaghetti-o time. The king is in check, and the queen is going to capture this rook on the next turn. And I've sacked the rook, and with it, I'm going to lose yet again to Magnus. So, after knight takes d5, I play this move d4. Now, what I should have done here is played the move knight to g3 first, and there's a very specific reason I should have played this move. The reason is that, as we'll see in the game, there's one thing that is very different. So, for example, black should go c6, d4 takes, and here the position is very balanced. You have these knights on active squares, but the most important thing here is that both the white knight and the black knight have access to the f5 and f4 squares respectively, whereas in the game, when I play an imprecise move order with d4, takes, here Magnus is able to play c5. Now, I had a very similar position against Fabiano Caruana, the candidates in 2024, but the big difference between this game and that game is that when I played Fabiano, his bishop was on the c5 square when we reached this pawn structure versus Magnus having the bishop on the a7 square. Now, the reason all this matters, and it shows really how tough top-level chess is that when Magnus plays move c5 here, I cannot put my knife on f5 because I would simply lose the knife, and with it, I would lose the game. So I have to go back to f3. We now get b5, bishop c2, and after the move bishop to b7, suddenly these bishops on the diagonals are very, very active, and already here I was very unhappy with the position. Now, you'll also notice at this point, I'm up 20 minutes on the clock here. I realize my diagonal's not great from b7. I'm up 20 minutes on the clock, so luckily I can start to think. Now, the more I thought, the more unhappy I became with my position before I played this move a4 after a 30-minute think. This is a move that I sort of played a little bit out of desperation. Probably what I should have played was this move knight to e3. I was very worried about knight to f4, knight to f5, and something like queen f6. It looks very scary with the bishops lined up on these diagonals, the queen on f6, the weaknesses on the king side. I simply was very concerned, and I didn't go for this. So when I spent the 30 minutes on a4, I expected Magnus to play c4, but the line that I was going to go for here initially simply doesn't work. Now, the move that I first thought about playing was bishop to e3, but after knight takes, bishop, knight takes, here black can simply play a move like knight to f4, and when you look at the combination, of the B's on the diagonal combined with the knife on f4, black is doing great. This bishop on a7 is tremendous. It is unopposed on the diagonal, and these knights are simply not it. So then I thought, why not play bishop to e4? Now, the reason I didn't play bishop e4 is I thought that after the move f5, bishop takes, and queen takes, we're headed for an endgame where I'm down on the clock, and it looks very difficult to play. Now, the computer says after bishop to e3, white is fine. I was concerned about takes, takes, and I thought after bishop takes e3, knight takes e3, and something like knight to e5 here, I was in danger. There's a weak pawn on f3. There's knight to d3 with the connect 4 and the bastion as well to hit the pawn on b2, and it's an endgame, and you're playing Magnus. So I simply overestimated Magnus's position in the resulting endgame. Had I realized this was okay, I would have played it. So back to the game. Now, you have to understand this time control in the Norway chess event is without increment, meaning that if you get low on time, you're simply going to lose games. Now, we've actually seen quite a few games be decided in the classical portion because there's no increment. We saw Arjun crush Gukesh in a massive time scramble today. We saw Fabiano beat Wei Yi, not to do spoilers, but you guys heard it here. And both those games were decided by the time and the fact that players were getting low, and with no increment, if you get to 5 minutes on move 25, you're going to get cooked in the game. So here I've spent already another 20 minutes. I'm panicking. I'm not happy with bishop e3. I'm not happy with bishop e4. And finally, I just play the move bishop d2 after a 30-minute thing. Now, at this point, I'm down 40 minutes on the clock with no increment. We're on move number 18, 22 minutes and 34 minutes, or 22 moves and 35 minutes against a player of Magnus' caliber is anything but ideal. What I told myself after I played bishop d2 during the game is that I'm going to move fast. No matter what, I'm going to make sure that I do not get low on the clock. I'll play a move in a minute. If I blunder and lose, but I'm not going to end up in a situation where I get low and inevitably I lose the game because of that. So Magnus played the move queen c7 here. This move is maybe not that bad, but I was actually quite concerned about this move knight d to f4 with D's knights and D's bishops. Maybe after bishop takes g6, it's okay, but honestly, I was very concerned about this idea of knight h3 and fg6, and it looks really, really bad. Apparently, white's okay here because you have bishop e3, but the line that I saw was this move knight to h2, and I think after knight to h2, maybe it doesn't work, but I thought there was this computer line with queen to h4, sacking the queen. I actually thought I was losing the game. Computer, I guess, says it's okay because apparently I can just go king f1, and with the extra queen, I guess bishop a7, I have knight f3, and I guess after bishop f3, I have queen c1 and bishop f4, and I'm okay. But honestly, I saw this line during the game with queen h4, and I was horrified, and I don't know if I would have gone for this line with knight h2 or not, because I simply was very concerned. But Magnus instead plays move queen c7, and now I was very happy because I could blitz out the move knight to d4, creating this temporary bastion with the knight hitting the pawn on b5, but more importantly, slamming the door shut on this bishop on the diagonal. So Magnus plays b4. Now I play the move queen g4 very quickly. Magnus goes rook e8, and now I play the move rook d1. Now you'll notice here that I've spent a whopping total of 5 minutes on the last 3 moves, and this comes back to the philosophy of knowing the situation and the time control, because Magnus here is one who has to prove the advantage and beat me, whereas I'm simply trying to finish my development here and asking Magnus what he's going to do. So Magnus takes. I take back, and you'll notice now after the move knight to f6, in the course of 5 moves, I've gone from being down 40 minutes on the clock to suddenly having evened out the time and in fact being up 4 minutes. So I've done a remarkable job of playing very quickly, and already here I was feeling very good about my chances. I know that it's still a little bit better for black, but it's a simplified position here, and now if anybody can try and press on the clock, I can maybe try to move quickly and put the heat on Magnus. So you get the move queen to a5, I play queen g5, Magnus decides to trade the queens. Here he could have gone back to c7, and I would have offered a draw with queen g3. It's really hard to do anything else here from the white side, because if I play a move like knight g3, it looks very natural. There's h6, and suddenly my queen is getting trapped. After queen to f5, there's this move, I believe knight h4. Yeah, knight h4 is simply winning. You fork the pawn and the queen. After queen f4, black can simply trade knight g2, and black is going to win the game. So had this occurred with queen c7, I would have played queen g3 back immediately, offering the draw, but Magnus decides to trade the queens and go knight e4. Now here I trade, I kind of have to, because otherwise I'm going to lose the pawn or the bishop. Magnus takes, and I play the move knight d2. Now I was very happy to reach this moment, primarily because even though it's an endgame where black has the bishop pair or the 2 Bs, with the weak pawn on c4, the great knight on d4, and the open b file potentially as well, I thought that I was out of danger. So we get bishop d5. Now I play knight c2 here, trying to angle for knight b4 to fork the bishop from the pawn, or go knight e3 to hit the pawn on c4. With these knights versus the two bishops, I thought, if anything, I might even be a little bit better. And when you add in the time factor where I'm up 6 minutes on the clock and I'm starting to push there as well, I started to get a touch optimistic. So Magnus here trades the rooks, and now he plays the move rook c8, and here I go knight to b4, forking the bishop and the pawn. We get bishop b7, and now I play the move knight to e4. Now already here Magnus has to be a little bit careful, because if he gets sloppy and plays a move like bishop b8 trying to stop the knight d6 fork, now I can go knight to c5 and look at these knights go after the bishop and the pawn. If black were to take, there's rook e8 check, knight f8 takes, and this is actually a line I was really hoping Magnus would blunder with takes, and thinking that he could go rook a5 and it would be a draw, but this actually would lose the game because I have knight c6 takes, knight e7 checking the king, and after king h8 and rook to b8, I'm going to win this knight on f8. I'll have an extra piece, and the rest will be very basic. So I was kind of hoping that Magnus might blunder this as he was getting low on time, but Magnus instead plays the best move a5. I go knight d6. He goes rook to b8. Not takes here, by the way, because after knight takes c8, I attack the bishop. If black takes, I check, knight f8, and bishop e7, and I'm setting up the classic ice skater checkmate where the king has no escape square, and black is going to lose both the knight and the bishop and the game. So Magnus goes rook to b8, guarding his bishop. I play knight c2, bishop c6, bishop e3, and after I played the move bishop e3, I simply offered Magnus a draw here, because after takes, black plays something like rook b3, or not rook b3, sorry, black plays move knight f4, that's right. I take with this knight, because otherwise I would lose the pawn on g2. And after a move like g6, knight a5, and bishop a4, white has an extra pawn on c3, but my knight is kind of dominated here on the rim. I don't really have many squares. It's the only square available because everything else is covered by the bishop or the rook. And when I go back to c4, black can go rook b3, winning the pawn on c3. Once black wins the pawn on c3, we simply have 3 pawns each on the king side, and there's no reason to continue. So, after bishop e3, I decide to offer Magnus a draw here. He gladly accepts, and that means we move to the Armageddon. Now, the Armageddon is a situation where white has 10 minutes, black has 7 minutes, and in this situation, I have the white pieces, but I must win the game. If Magnus draws or wins, he will get the extra half point. The scoring system, which I didn't get into yesterday, is such that if you win the classical game, you get 3 points. If you draw the classical game, both players get 1, and the Armageddon is for an extra half point. So basically, Magnus and I play for the final half point, and in this game, I start with the move knight f3. We get d5, g3, and Magnus plays the move g6. I go d4, bishop g7, and bishop g2. Now, in yesteryear, or the years of long ago, in 2020 and 2021, when I played Magnus in many of the Chess Champion Tour events, I actually let him play this line with d5 and e5 in the big black center and followed it up with something like c4. Very rarely did I get anything, but this time I don't want to give Magnus the big black center, so I cut him off right away before he can play e5, and now we get the move knight f6. We get castles, c4, Magnus goes c6, and now I play the move queen b3. Now this is what is known as the fianchetto Grunfeld. When black fianchettos the bishop and plays d5, that's considered the Grunfeld, and here I have fianchettoed my bishop, so it's basically the fianchetto Grunfeld. Now after the move c6 is played, we have both the Grunfeld and the Slav, because now we get the standard setup from the Slav system, which I had yesterday against Fabiano. So I go queen b3. We get takes, bishop f5, knight c3, knight d7, bishop f4, and now Magnus plays the move knight b6. I go queen b3, and here we get the move knight fd5. Now basically what this game is going to hinge upon is whether I can build a big white center with pawn to e4. If, for example, black were to play a move like bishop d7 and I get e4, with these knights guarding both the pawns, white has a ton of space and white should win the game. So Magnus goes knight d5. Here I play bishop e5, we get takes, and Magnus plays the move bishop to e4, basically trying to forever trade the light square bishops if possible, but also stopping me from playing e4 to build the aforementioned big white center. So here I trade the bishops, and now I play rook a c1, Magnus goes c5, and now I take the pawn. Now this move is in fact a mistake, and it's worth pointing out that at this moment, I was up nearly 3.5 minutes on the clock. It's 10 minutes versus 7 with no increment until I believe move number 61, and this would have been a good moment to think, because had I used my time and played the move c4 here, I would have been in really good shape after takes and rook d1. It's a temporary pawn sacrifice, but I'm going to win this pawn back. I also have c5 to kick the knight here, and it looks very, very promising. Instead, I try to play quickly. I take the pawn, we get knight d7, queen b4, Magnus goes knight f6, and now I play the move bishop h3. Now, this is a move that I simply played because I didn't want to get too low on time here. I'm trying to keep the flow going, trying to keep the pressure on the clock. I could have played a move like rook d1, but after queen c7 followed by rook c8, I simply thought I would lose the pawn on c5, and with it, I would not win the game. So I go bishop h3. Now, this is a dual-purpose move. First of all, I stop black from ever putting a rook on c8, but additionally, when black plays queen c7, now I'm free to move the knight, and black can no longer trade the light square bishops on the g2 square. We get the move b6, I decide to trade, and now I play the move queen b2 after a 3-minute think. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, what on earth is this 3-minute think? The reason I spent 3 minutes here is because I realized that I'm up an extra pawn. I have this extra pawn on a2, but the main issue I have here is that these two pawns on c3 and a2 are basically offsetting the pawn on b6, but I need to find a way to keep the game going as long as I can. So ultimately, I played the move queen b2, Magnus goes rook a4, and now I've squandered the time advantage, and at this moment, it's not looking very good. However, after the move rook a4, intending to line up the double stack on the a file here, I find a very pretty maneuver with this move bishop e6. Now, this, of course, looks like I'm sacrificing the bishop, but in fact, it's not a sacrifice at all, because if black takes, after knight takes e6, we get the classic family fork, or the royal fork. I fork the king, the queen, and the rook at the same time. Additionally, if black were to sack the rook, after pawn takes rook here, black does not have time to capture the bishop, because then you would get the Botez gambit and resign instantly. So we get rook a5. Now I play the move bishop b3, taking away any threats towards his pawn on a2, as my bishop is guarding it. However, with the bishop on the queen's side, now I have all kinds of light square weaknesses without the fianchettoed bishop. So Magnus plays e5. I go knight c2, we get h5, and now I play this horrible move h4. Now at this point, it's already very tough to play for me. Magnus is trying to play h4, rook h8. He's trying to attack me on these light squares near my king, and it's very tough to play. Now, the computer here, of course, says that after a move like knight g4, black is fine. Even h4, I guess g4 maybe is okay. It's very tough to play, and I simply decided to play this move h4 because I thought, hey, I'm stopping black from playing h4 and opening up the h file. How bad can it be? However, pretty much as soon as I played this move, I spotted that Magnus had the option to go either queen d7 or the move queen to c8. Both these moves are very nice because there's this big threat of queen to h3 followed by the classic lolly checkmate on either g2 or h1. Probably what I should do here is go king h2, knight g4, and then simply make the draw. But remember, as it's an Armageddon game, a draw is no good. That would be the same as a loss. Magnus, however, instead decides to play the shocking move knight g4, and now after I play the move knight to a3, I thought I was back in business. Now, the reason I went knight a3 here was very simple. I wanted to play this move f3, but after queen to c5 here, there are all kinds of weaknesses on the e3 and f2 squares, and I thought that if I get the knight to c4, as we're about to see, if black moves the rook and I go f3, the knight covers this e3 square, and I fork the bishop and the knight. So I go knight to a3. Now, Magnus here apparently should have played the move bishop to a8, trying to set up the classic double A battery on the diagonal. Instead, he plays the move g5. Now I go knight to c4, Magnus plays the move g takes h4, and this is a really critical moment. Now, while I'm not doing great on the board here, and I'm also down on time, this is a situation where the game is getting messy. And when it gets messy here, especially with no increment, one of the most important things is who has the easier moves. Now, in this position, I would argue that even though black is better, white has the easier moves because I'm attacking the rook, I have f3 to fork the bishop and the knight, and black better have an attack on the king side. So Magnus decides to take. Now I play the move f3, and at this point, everything is en prise, as the French would say. The bishop and the knight are getting forked, the rook on a5 is hanging, and black simply doesn't have a quick way to checkmate my king. Now, that being said, black is better. Magnus should win this game with perfect play, but with no increment here, he spends a whopping 1 minute before playing this move queen c5. This is the best move, but he burns a minute, and after king to h1, Magnus now burns a minute 10 seconds before playing this move bishop to a8, and also he gets down to 24 seconds, and with no increment until move number 61, with us only on move number 29 here, the chance of me winning go up dramatically. Now here I play the move knight takes a5 after a 20-second think. Magnus decides to take, and here I play the move e4. Now, I have a very tough decision here because there's no increment, meaning that it's a situation where I have to judge, do I look for the best move or do I move quickly to try and flag Magnus? I wasn't really sure. Ultimately, I played this move e4, which is a mistake. I initially wanted to play the move queen d2, but I thought that there was the move e4 covering the g5 square here, and I didn't see a good move. Computer, of course, laughs and says I can calmly take the pawn on h4 with the idea of queen g5 checking the king and white's winning here. Of course, with time, it's a very easy move. With the situation where I have to decide how much time to use and try to find a good move versus the best move, ultimately I decide to go e4 instead. Now Magnus takes the pawn, and here I cannot take the horse, because after bishop takes e4, it's uh-oh spaghetti-o time. The king has no square on h1 or g2. If I block with the queen, black just takes, and after h4, with a queen for a rook and a bishop, Magnus will win this in his sleep. So I play bishop d5. Now at this point, I'm just trying to mess up the game, play on Magnus's clock. He trades the bishops, he plays knight e3, and now I go rook g1. Magnus plays h4, and here I play the move c4. Now, Magnus sort of panics. He spends 3 seconds before playing this queen d4 move. Completely understandable, but the computer says that after the cold-blooded move f6 here, with these pawns, Magnus pushing his p on the king's side, this great knight, black is better. But Magnus with 18 seconds goes for the very logical move queen d4, because when you don't have time on the clock, what you need is a position where you don't have options, meaning that in this endgame, you should just be able to play every move in half a second to 1 second. So I trade the queens, and now I go for the move d6. Now, I thought that I was actually losing here, even though I have the 2 connected pawns, primarily because Magnus can get his king over. But with only 15 seconds, this is a pure scramble of bullet chess. Magnus plays rook b8, which is a mistake here. What Magnus was hoping is that I would play d7, because after the move rook to b2 here, if I queen the pawn, there's rook h2, checkmating my king in the corner. And if I sack the rook with the rook takes pawn and then promote to a queen, it's still a draw by repetition, as my king has to stay on these 2 squares. I can't run the king closer, and that will be good enough for Magnus to win. But I spot the best move, rook to b1, stopping the idea of rook b2 with the kebab on the second rank. We get rook d8, and now I play the move c5. Now here I'm winning because Magnus has wasted too long getting his king over, and I'm simply pushing my p. My p is flying down the board, and it's all over. Magnus plays king f6, I go c6, he takes, I play c7, rook c6, and this is the last moment where I have to be very careful. Now, I spend 13 seconds before playing the move rook c1. Initially, I wanted to play the move rook b6, sacking the rook, but after rook takes rook, queen, and rook to b2, with this knight covering the f1 square and these 2 pawns supporting rook h2, as you can tell from the valuation bar, the game is going to be a draw. So I spend 13 seconds, and luckily, I realize that there's no way to win there, and I find the best move, which is rook g to c1. Now you'll notice how the 2 towers are covering the open b and c files. Magnus is never, ever able to get the kebab on the second rank with the rook h2 idea, and now the game is basically over. Now Magnus plays the move knight c4. He could have sacked the rook, but after takes, let's just say h3, for example, I can simply go rook g1, g2, king h2, and these pawns are going to fall, and that's before the fact that I have another rook on the board still, which is going to mop up a pawn, and I should be able to win. So Magnus goes knight c4, but now I'm able to play the move rook to b6, sacking the rook, because here, if black takes with the knight, I have rook takes rook, checking the king, winning the knight, and winning the game. And now when Magnus plays rook takes rook, I can promote to a queen, and here there are no ideas with rook b2, because if you play rook b2, for example, I can simply eat the horse, and after check king g1, there's no knight on e3 to support the checks, and it's just GG, why not? And if you play a move like knight e3 back here, I can simply go rook c6, trade the rooks off the board, bring the queen back, win these pawns over time, as a queen is worth more than a knight, and I will win the game. So, I get a very big win in this Armageddon game against Magnus Carlsen. Not a clean game by any stretch from either of us. I think both of us were sort of lacking. We sort of were just getting into it. We were too slow at various moments. Ultimately, I end up coming out on top, and that means that after 2 rounds in Norway chess, I am currently tied for the lead alongside Arjun Erigaisi, who today won his classical game against Gukesh Domaraju from India. Arjun won in Armageddon yesterday, so similar to me, he has one draw in classical with an Armageddon win, and then also classical win. So we're tied for the lead after 2 rounds, but for me, most importantly, is that I was able to keep it together when I was under pressure against Magnus, make the draw in the classical game, and all's well that ends well. So, that means tomorrow I will be playing against Gukesh, who is off to a shocking start with 2 losses out of his first 2 games. I will have the black pieces, so we'll see how it goes, but at any rate, I'm just happy to be playing pretty well. So on that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed the recap of both the classical game as well as the Armageddon game that I played against the 5-time world champion, Magnus Carlsen, today. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back with a recap after I play against Gukesh tomorrow. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and have a great rest of your evening. See you soon. Bye.